Hey everyone, this is Andrew Jordan with Jordan CPA Services. In this video, I'm going to dive into some of the operational considerations I want you thinking about if you're going to be bringing in a key employee to be an owner. Now, in the last video, we talked about, does that key employee really need to be an owner? And if you didn't watch that video, I strongly encourage you to go back and watch it. I think it's the most important one of this series. But if you've gotten to this point and you've decided, yes, this person does need to be an owner, or I want them to be an owner, let's talk the details of the operational considerations you should be thinking of. I often tell my CFO clients is you pay me a lot of money to tell you things you don't want to hear. And if you're watching this video, you maybe haven't paid me anything, but I'm still going to tell you something that you don't necessarily want to hear. As entrepreneurs, we are good at vision casting, we're good at seeing into the future, and we just know that that key employee who's doing really well, if we make them an owner, they're going to be that much more motivated. And that does not often work out the way that we think it will. One of the reasons is a lot of people in our country have this perception that management or owners are kind of these fat cats that are lazy, that don't have to do very much. And oftentimes that's why people want a promotion and they want to become an owner because they think they have to do less. The owner does more than probably anyone else in most companies, right? We have the risk, but also like we end up doing everything. That is not something that's necessarily the perspective of the key employee we're talking about. So if you haven't had this conversation with them, it's a really important one to have. Have it explicitly. Don't just say, well, they know I end up, always answering the phone, even if it's a weekend. No, they don't. Or even if they do, they might not think that you have that expectation with them becoming an owner. Set out and have multiple conversations and then write things down so it's crystal clear what you said and what they understood. Hey, if you become an owner, here's what I think that would look like. I talked in the last video also about values. This is a similar thing, making sure you have alignment about what their role would be as an owner. Another consideration, and again, it's something that people don't like to think about, but it is really important to think about beforehand. What are you going to do if you decide to part ways? And one of the things we often recommend to people is it's sort of like an earn-out, right? Because what if they become an owner and they start behaving radically differently? And if you think there's no way that would happen, this absolutely happens, right? People have every good intention. I'm not saying there's any bad intention necessarily, but good people with good intentions don't always end up doing what they think that they will. If you end up parting ways, you don't have to buy them back for a huge amount. Especially because what often happens is, look, I'm just going to give them 10% or give them 20%. In the next video, we're going to talk about the tax ramifications of some of this. So that's coming. That's important to consider. A year from now, they get an amazing job, or they have a health issue, or they end up moving to a different country, whatever happens, and you end up having to buy them out. Can you trigger that at any time? What do they have to agree to it? And then how are their shares valued? And I strongly recommend, if you're not going to have them buy in, like if they buy in for $100,000, maybe make the deal, I will buy you out for that same $100,000 for the next year, 2 years, 3 years. If things are working after the end of 3 years, like you're probably pretty much in the clear, like things are going to be probably pretty good. If you're giving them the shares, I would often recommend you have $1 buyback. Look, if this doesn't work out, then I'm going to buy you back for $1 at the end of year 1. And at the end of year 2, that becomes $10,000 if you wanted to. At the end of year 3, it becomes $50,000. And anytime after that, we'll have a business valuation done, but spell that out, because they're going to want to use their uncle or their friend or whoever who's going to come up with a business valuation that's going to be a lot higher than someone else's business valuation. You don't necessarily have to specify the individual you will use, but even as specific as like, we're going to use someone with this kind of certification to do the business valuation, or we're going to get 2 different certified people and they're going to come up with the value and we're going to take the average of those 2 or something like that. You're not thinking about it, but 10 years from now, they're going to need to be bought out for whatever reason, or 20 years from now, and it's a radically different company that's maybe hopefully worth a whole lot more. You want to be thinking about that too, what's going to happen then. That is, by the way, another consideration. When are they going to want to retire? You might say, well, we're about the same age. I'm going to work another 20 or 30 years. They're going to too. They might not be thinking that. And so you want to make sure you consider that. Another factor, and these should all be spelled out in this agreement, written agreement. Absolutely hire a lawyer for this. By the way, don't try and pull something off the internet. You need a lawyer in your state who has expertise in this kind of matter. What are you going to do if they want to retire before you do? And it's a time when you have a cash crunch in your business and they're like, hey, buy me out. And you're like, well, I don't have $300,000 sitting around to buy you out. I'm going to have to get a loan for that. it could be disastrous for your business. So you often want to spell this out too. If I have to buy you out, you're going to carry the loan. I'm going to pay you out over 3 years. Specify the interest rate. I'd have a pretty low interest rate, all that kind of stuff. This might seem non-essential. This is really crucial. And you will sleep better at night having gone through and thought about, hey, for the first 3 years, I know I'm protected because I can buy it back for $1 if things don't work out. That one in particular is a really major one. Or if whatever happens, health issue, retirement, something happens and I have to buy them out, it's not going to tank my business because I have to come up with a ton of cash right away that I don't necessarily have. Some other operational considerations here. Who gets to have the final say on decisions? Like, are they having a clearly delineated set of roles and responsibilities? One of the reasons my partner and I work really well together is because we follow a system called EOS. It's from the book Traction. Highly recommend it. A lot of our clients use it or some kind of variation of it. I'm the visionary role. She's the integrator role. If it comes to something technical, that's me, and I have final say on it. If it's something operational, even if I disagree with her, she gets the final say on it, and that's how we run things, and it runs really well because we have clearly delineated roles based on what we're really good at. You might not want to give up any specific control, then spell that out. How about things like buying new equipment? They're out on vacation somewhere and they see this piece of equipment they know you guys got to have, and they went ahead and bought it. How would you feel about that? What if they want to go in a new direction, open up a new market, new product, new service offering, any of those kind of things? Do you get final say? Do they get final say? These are important things to have discussed beforehand because expectations are going to be different on these kind of things unless you specifically talk through them. Specifically talk through them and put them in writing in a legally binding document. That's what we want to do here. Another important difference is your profits. Are you going to be reinvesting your profits in the company or are you going to be distributing them to owners? And if you are distributing them, who determines that? Like they want to buy a lake house, you want to invest more in the business so you can grow a bunch more next year. What are you going to do? What we often see is the operating agreement spells out that we will do a distribution every year to cover taxes. That's often an important thing because you might have other sources of income and they might not, or vice versa. And so you might have very different expectations about when and how distributions are going to happen. Don't lock yourself into anything either. My strong recommendation is don't come up with some complicated formula of hypothetically 5 years from now what you're going to distribute. A really generally good one is we're going to distribute enough to cover taxes. Everyone's generally pretty happy with that. That generally works out pretty well for people. But then beyond that, you as the majority owner, the person who's keeping the majority interest, you decide distributions. You have the final say. Of course, you'll consult with them, but you have the final say. But spell that out. Here's another one. Time devoted to doing other projects. Logically, you might say, look, we've got this company. We are going places. We're doing great things. They're going to want to spend all their time in this business because, they're an owner of it and they have a piece of it. That's not how people think. They're going to end up valuing, and studies have consistently shown this, by the way, that humans are very bad at valuing money. They're going to disproportionately value the $50 they made doing this little side venture over the wealth that they're building with you at this company. And so spell out how much time are you allowed to be devoted to other projects. If they come in as a 10% owner and you all of a sudden get interested in having a bunch of rental properties, they might not be happy with that. And that would be a valid thing for them to be potentially unhappy about. I thought you were going to be devoting all your time to this, and now I see you're being distracted over here, and that's not what I expected, and now I'm unhappy. So spell that out in advance. Last thing I have is, as an owner, they can often legally bind you. So not a lawyer, I'm not giving you legal advice here, but they can often legally bind your company in contracts and leases and all those kind of things. If you don't want them to be able to do that, talk to your lawyer about how you prevent them from being able to do that without you being involved. And again, I know it doesn't seem like this person would ever go rogue. They might be, in your mind, going rogue, and in their mind, they're being super helpful by getting you a great deal on this forklift that you know that you can't afford, but it was a great deal, and the salesman was very convincing, and now you've got a real problem on your hands. So talk to your lawyer specifically for your state. If you don't want them to be able to legally bind you, talk to your lawyer and see what your options are. I hope this is helpful. These are the operational considerations. You don't have to have them all completely sorted out before you talk with them or before you talk with your lawyer. But before they become an owner, I'd want to get every one of these things sorted out in writing, written up by a lawyer, legally binding and protecting yourself. And it's not just protecting yourself, it's also protecting them and protecting the business by spelling things out with a lot of clarity on the front end.